Sustainability Committee. My name's Andy Waite, and we're here to go through various items on the agenda. This meeting is webcast, so you will be seen by thousands of people if you are going to take part in any way. If you do not wish to be webcast, then please indicate that when you wish to speak. Okay, you will have noticed that there is an air purifier in the corner there, and we have actually opened a window over there because we want to keep the flow, and we turned off the air purifier over there because it was too loud. So if anybody finds the air purifier too noisy, then please let me know. But we want to try and keep everybody healthy, and that's the sort of compromise we've reached. Okay, enough from me. So, emergency evacuation procedure, please.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to a variety of Cabinet members we have with us. We have Matt, we have Sarah, we have Alison. And we will have, I'm sure, Mark later on for his budget item. Okay, so apologies for absence and substitutions.
Apologies from Councillor Hal McPhee. Apologies from Councillor John Leach, who's been substituted by Councillor Bharat Pankania. And for the Labour vacancy, we have Councillor Eleanor Jackson.
Welcome. So, declarations of interest. Eleanor?
I'm a director of the Radstock Cooperative Society, who have a development that has some sort of relationship to AQUIS, but not in any way that would influence what I'm going to say.
Well, thank you for letting us
know.
Yes, thank you for letting us know. That's the right thing to do. Any other declarations of interest? Okay. I'm happy for you, Eleanor, to speak on the AQUIS issue. I don't think that's a problem. Item 5, I don't have any urgent business. So we move on to item 6, which is slightly different from usual. We have 3 items from members of the public, but only one member of the public is present. So welcome to Rory, is it? Lily, sorry, to Lily. And Alison is going to speak on behalf of Rory, is that right? Yes. And Sarah is going to speak on behalf of Lucy. So, I'm going to start with Alison. So if you'd like to make your statements, please.
Thank you. I'm reading the statement on behalf of Professor Rory Shaw, who is unable to attend today's meeting. He lives in Widcombe, which is the ward I represent, and is a retired consultant chest physician. His wife suffers from asthma, which is particularly exacerbated by smoke, so he has both a professional and a personal interest in air quality. And his statement is entitled Reducing Air Pollution in Bath. The problem with air pollution is that it is invisible and everywhere. Pollution kills and disables us humans by causing the major killing diseases of heart attacks, stroke, lung cancer, chronic bronchitis and asthma. Pollution can kill quickly. There are more stroke and heart attack fatalities within hours of a pollution spike. Pollution also leads to progressive accelerated disability, with costs to the patient and the NHS. In children, there is progressive lifelong disadvantage due to recurrent infection and impaired lung growth, as well as time off school. There are 2 aspects to the science. The more visible the smoke and the more you can smell it, the greater the number of partially combusted particles, which in turn have been rendered toxic by heating. Good examples of the most dangerous smoke are bonfire smoke, wood and coal smoke. The second very dangerous type is the smoke containing microscopic toxic soot particles, PM10s and PM2.5s, which penetrate deep into the lungs, past the body's normal defence systems. These are released by diesel engines. Bath has a particular problem. The steep valleys restrict pollution dispersal. We have canal boats which traditionally burn solid fuel. we have not enacted bonfire restrictions in built-up areas. Many homes use wood-burning stoves. There are also still many diesel vehicles on our roads. On the plus side, Bath people are sensible, proud of their city and interested in their environment. The first step has to be a well-thought-through public education campaign combined with reminders about adhering to current legislation, for example, barge owners. In addition, I suggest small but high-profile steps. Make public announcements about rigorously enforcing the Highways Act of 1980 by issuing abatement notices to any householder whose bonfire smoke spreads outside the curtilage of their garden, and randomly inspecting barges emitting yellow smoke. These will upset very few people, yet make a small but significant difference to pollution, and importantly, show that the Council has started to take action. I would focus my education campaign around mothers and children. Damaging children's health for life seems a cruel thing to do just because we can't be bothered to avoid causing air pollution. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. That statement will be attached to the minutes. Because Alison is not the author, there are no questions allowed of the reader of the statement. So on that basis, I will move on to the second one, which is Lily Hughes, who's going to speak for 3 minutes on a similar topic, I think.
Thank you. Air pollution in Bains is a huge concern, and while tackling vehicle emissions is essential, the progress made will simply not be enough if the Council continues to ignore the problem of domestic burning. In 2024, government data showed that wood burning has overtaken traffic as the main source of particulate pollution across the UK, and policies such as Bath's Clean Air Zone aimed at reducing vehicle emissions have no impact on wood burning. The data also showed that PM2.5 emissions from home burning went up by 56% in the decade leading up to 2022, as wood burners rose in popularity, in part driven by the mistaken belief that they're more eco-friendly than other heating methods. Burning wood is not carbon neutral and actually releases more carbon dioxide than coal or gas. In the majority of cases, domestic burning is unnecessary, more expensive than gas central heating, and done purely for aesthetic reasons. According to the Chief Medical Officer's 2022 air pollution report, solid fuels are by far the most polluting method of domestic heating. It found that a DEFRA-approved eco-design stove gives off 450 times more PM2.5 than a gas boiler and has an estimated emission rate of 6 times the mass of PM2.5 than a diesel HGV. A 2025 study found that multi-fuel eco-design stoves emit more ultrafine particles than a standard eco-design stove, and that wood briquettes and smokeless coal actually increased ultrafine particle exposure by 1.7 and 1.5 times respectively, compared to seasoned wood, showing that simply switching to smokeless fuel does not make burning safer. PM2.5 is associated with many conditions, including decreased lung development, asthma, allergies, COPD, pulmonary fibrosis, and a hugely increased risk of lung and breast cancer. A 2023 study showed that people who use their wood burner on more than 30 days a year had a 68% increased lung cancer risk compared with people who did not burn wood. Air pollution from burning in UK homes contributes to nearly 2,500 premature deaths and costs the NHS millions of pounds every year. Despite blocking up our doors and windows, smoke from neighbours' chimneys inevitably comes into our house. Why should our children have to breathe this dangerous air? The complaint system is not fit for purpose. Between 2024 and 2025, 103 complaints about wood burners were made in Bains, which resulted in just 6 warning letters, 2 inspections and 0 fines. The Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health has called for a phase-out of domestic wood burning in urban areas, and as a local authority, you have a huge responsibility here. I urge you to follow other councils' lead and use all your available channels to inform and discourage domestic burning unless it is the only source of heat. Many people are simply not aware of the realities, and residents need to be advised that it leads to potentially serious health problems for themselves and their neighbours. The scientific evidence is conclusive. Domestic burning is a growing yet avoidable problem, and action is urgently needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Does anybody have any factual questions for Lucy? Lily, sorry. Yes, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Lily, for your statement. Do you believe that government should help residents with funding so that they can have
Actually, that's
less
not,
solid
sorry, that's
fuel.
not a factual question. You're asking her an opinion.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Saskia?
Thank you, Lily, for your statement. What can Baines do now to educate people of the dangers of wood burning?
As I said, use all their channels available, social media, written media, just to inform about these dangers, because, yeah, many people have absolutely no idea about it.
Anybody else? Eleanor?
Thanks very much for a very informative statement. Would a supplementary policy, an SPD thing, help if it were to ban domestic bonfires?
Actually, I think that's an opinion as well. You're asking for an opinion from the...
I know from the Birmingham figures it would, to be quite honest, but I didn't know if it would apply here or not.
You appear to have answered your own question, Eleanor, so thank you for that. Right, anything from anybody else? Okay, actually, I'd like to echo what Eleanor said. Very helpful, very informative, and as you probably know, we have an item on the agenda, item 11, which is about air pollution in Bath. So if you can stay for that, that'd be lovely. If not, we are on video, and you can listen to us speaking worlds of wisdom or rubbish later on in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, we move on to our third statement, which is going to be spoken by Sarah, and it is a statement from Lucy Anderson. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, I'm reading the statement from Dr. Lucy Anderson, who is the UK Research and Innovation Regional Clean Air Champion for South West England, and also Research Fellow in Environment and Public Health at the University of Bristol, and a Widcombe resident, not Widcombe, Newbridge. So she says, air pollution remains one of the most significant environmental determinants of ill health in the UK. The Royal College of Physicians estimates that air pollution contributes to around 40,000 deaths each year in the UK. The associated health harms, which include cardiovascular disease, respiratory illness, cancer and dementia, are estimated to cost the UK economy £50 billion per year and disproportionately affect vulnerable populations, further exacerbating health inequalities. These health harms are not confined to time periods or locations that breach legal limits. Growing evidence shows that adverse health effects can occur at concentrations well below current UK legal thresholds. This is reflected in the World Health Organization's 2021 Air Quality Guidelines, which set substantially lower recommended levels for nitrogen dioxide, PM10 and PM2.5 particulates. In the UK, this has recently prompted an inquiry by the Environmental Audit Committee, which will consider whether existing targets are sufficiently aligned with health protection. Local authorities are increasingly developing clean air strategies to support strategic and consistent area-wide approaches to managing air quality. Across England, there is growing precedent for using such strategies to set a clear health-led direction of travel. Several authorities have chosen to adopt locally ambitious targets that go beyond national minimum requirements, recognising the benefits of doing so for population health. For example, Brighton and Hove City Council's Air Quality Action Plan, approved in 2022, aims to reach an annual mean of 30 micrograms per cubic metre outdoor nitrogen dioxide across all areas of the city by 2027, which is 25% lower than the UK legal requirement of 40. Having set a 30 microgram outdoor nitrogen dioxide limit in its 2021 to 25 Air Quality Action Plan, Oxford City Council has now gone one step further, aligning with emerging EU standards and setting a 20 microgram nitrogen dioxide target by 2030 in its latest plan. These examples demonstrate that locally defined clean air strategies and targets can play a role in aligning action with health evidence rather than focusing solely on minimum legal compliance. In developing a clean air strategy with ambitious air quality targets, Baines Council would be joining a progressive set of councils signalling their dedication to protecting population health and reducing health inequalities, particularly for the most vulnerable.
Thank you, Sarah. That is also a statement, so we cannot question Sarah about a statement written by somebody else. So that brings to an end public statements, and thank you, particularly you, Lily, for coming and educating us. That was very helpful. Okay, so we move on to the next item, which is item 7, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any questions, or would somebody like to propose that we accept the minutes? Eleanor?
Chair, there's a typo on, I wasn't there, of course, so I'm not proposing the minutes, but there's a typo on, sorry, I've got to try and find the right glasses. Page 7, the phrase cabinet member appears twice under 177.
We accept that change. Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor. Proposer to accept the minutes? Karen?
Propose to accept the minutes as they are.
With the minor amendment, yeah. A seconder? Thank you, Saskia. Those in favour of accepting the minutes, please raise your hands. Yeah. Abstentions? And any against? No. So they're carried. Thank you very much. We move on to Cabinet Member Updates, item 8, and we have one Cabinet Member update from Sarah, who is going to regale us with all the activities that she's been doing since our last meeting, in about 2 minutes.
Well, the main thing I wanted to update you about actually is forward plan, actually, because in our 2024 Climate and Nature Progress Report, the Council set out that we would bring together our current 2019 Climate Strategy and Action Plan and 2020 Ecological Emergency Action Plan into the one updated Strategy and Action Plan, which we did, recognising the interconnectedness of the emergencies and producing a single document, updating how the corporate core policy of tackling the climate and ecological emergencies would be delivered. At the PDS panel that you attended on the 23rd of October, we agreed that participation, so that the PDS panel would participate in policy development around an updated climate and nature strategy, and that would be an agenda item in spring 2026. So I just wanted to update you really on the timeline that we're proposing, that we have been discussing with the chair of the committee. So we're proposing that on the 26th of March, that we will dedicate the whole meeting of this panel to policy development around climate and nature strategy, so that you'll have an opportunity to feed into strategy direction at that stage. And then on the 9th of July, that your agenda will include an item focused around climate resilience and adaptation. But by that time, we'll have done an assessment as to the risks that Bath and North East Somerset Council foresees in the light of climate change. So that will be a good moment to have that conversation. And then on the 24th of September, we hope to come back to you with a draft strategy, including some proposals of targets. At that stage, we will be updating you on progress against the targets since they were last reported in 2025, and also bring you a revised action plan. So the panel will have the opportunity to scrutinise this final draft before the November Cabinet and Council meetings, when we hope that the new updated action plan will be adopted. But what that means then is, because we've got one set of officers who are doing this work, and they're the same people who produce annual progress reports, so what we're proposing is that for this 1 year only, there would not be a separate annual progress report, which you often receive in the autumn, but that we will bundle them up together as a part of the same discussion. So I hope that's an acceptable timeline. So in other news, you might like to know that there has been a recent successful bid for electric vehicle charging infrastructure for the Keynesham Recycling Hub, which will support the purchase of electric HGVs. And we've also secured funding with Wessex Water and South West Water to deliver a Connecting Catchments programme, which has match funding from the Bath and North East Somerset Council SIL fund as part of the Water Industry National Environment Programme. And we're now recruiting for 3 new staff who will work across the Chew and Cam and Wellow Valley catchments to help deliver nature recovery and improve water quality. In another piece of news, developments on the Bath River Line path, which is making improvements to
that walking and cycling space for accessibility and for nature. Much has been completed. Phase 1A is substantially completed. Final works are the installation of the seating nook and rain garden installed at Midland Bridge. Wayfinding has been installed from Pulteney Bridge to Newbridge. The river stories interpretation boards are being installed around now. Phase 1B, which is Norfolk Crescent Steps and Comfortable Place and Green Park Play Area, will be going into construction in February by Volker for completion by summer. And further funding has been sought for the Windsor Bridge area. We're looking for grant funding from WECA to complete the technical design for construction during the rest of the year. And that will be on the WECA committee meeting agenda on the 30th of January. So, that's.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Sarah on those issues? Yes, Duncan. Welcome, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, really good news about the Bath River line. Well, that's excellent news. Do you have any update or information you could give us on the Better Moorings project, which was relocating moorings to new location with new facilities?
I don't have any information on that today, but I'll catch up with you soon about that, Duncan.
Any other questions? Okay, I've got one. It's about the timeline of your action plan draft strategy, which I welcome. I think it's a really supportive and sensible thing to do. And that is I'm going to ask, it's sort of, you and Matt has the question, because you said that you would like to have a one-item agenda on the 26th of March, but I understand that there is a draft plan item which the draft planners would like, or the planners, they're not draft, are they, would actually appreciate time at that meeting as well. Is that right, Matt?
And yeah, your March meeting does afford you the opportunity to scrutinise where we are with the draft local plan. We're obviously liaise a bit closer to the time about how much of that is available, but I'm assuming that members will want to look at that, particularly the development management policies. So we need to speak close to the time about what's ready.
Okay, the May meeting is available for you, Sarah, but probably not for you, Matt, because it will probably be too late then.
Well, Cabinet's due to sign off on the draft local plan in May, at its May meeting, sign it off for consultation, so there wouldn't be the opportunity to feed in any changes that this panel might want. Okay, so, yes, Sarah?
Well, it sounds like there needs to be then further discussions about how those timelines fit together. But what we were quite keen to do, and I'm interested to know whether it's what you'd like, is if we can find an appropriate time, we wanted to bring to you a big, chunky policy development discussion, a long one, around the climate and nature strategy. So if it isn't the March meeting, we can look at whether the May timeline works. If that doesn't work, you could choose, if you wished, to put another date in the diary, an additional date, to make that possible. But I'll leave that for discussions, I guess, on timelines between the officers and you as a committee.
I think it's fair to say, I'll speak for the panel when we're very keen to hear about both these things, and it's just a question of finding the best timings for the meetings going forward. And if necessary, I think we should look at an additional meeting, because obviously climate emergency panel should be looking at the sort of things that you just talked about, Sarah, because if we don't look at that, then what are we doing here? So we will come back to that discussion. Yes, Saskia.
Thank you. Another idea could be to extend the meeting in March.
Yes, that's true, although my experience of extending meetings beyond 2 hours is not always very helpful. I think there's a bit of meeting fatigue creeping in, especially amongst the old people like me, so I don't know about that. But we'll certainly consider it. I'm up for it, up for anything more or less. Okay, thank you very much. I think that moves us on to the Aqueous business plan update. We have a presentation from Matt, excuse me, and we have 30 minutes for this item, so the floor is yours, Matt.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I'm just doing a quick introduction because obviously Tim, as Managing Director, obviously knows the detail. I just wanted to cover off Where we sit in the housing market, I think at the moment we offer, in Bath and North East Somerset, Aquis offers a very high value product, and that's not just, I don't really mean financially valuable, I mean socially valuable, in that by delivering a EPC A, we're making the units we build very cost efficient to live in, sort of aspirational. As someone who lives in an EPC F house, EPC A just seems like a dream. So we are delivering a really high value, social value product in a market that is very difficult. So clearly when the previous government lost control of the economy and the cost of living crisis was initiated, that's also led on to huge increase in costs right through the economy, particularly in construction, which is something that obviously the company has to deal with. But the average house price in Bath and North East Somerset has remained fairly stable at 416,000. Now that's 10 times the average salary. So that's an interesting place. We don't want that necessarily shooting up if we can help it. Rental inflation has outpaced wage growth. So again, there's somewhere else where the council can intervene through Aquis. I know there's always an issue around affordable, defined by the government as 80% of market. So I think 80% of 416 is just shy of 350,000. And there are those who would argue that 350,000 is not affordable, and probably rightly so. And clearly Bath has additional pressures there. But when we look ahead, we can see that house price growth is still predicted to grow just over 20% by 2030. That may be ambitious, but it does mean that what we're building, the sale value of those units where we are selling, means that profitability might be high, and really important to remember that where Aquis is generating profits, okay, yes, there's the dividend that has to be paid to the council, but that cash is ploughed back into affordable on-site in our developments. And so that's really important. That's why we keep a very careful eye on profits that Aquis is able to deliver, because that means more affordable in Bath and North East Somerset. So that's all. I just wanted to just set that out, I think, in terms of where we are in the market, what we're doing, what we're delivering, and the challenges that Aquis faces. And I'll hand over to Tim, who has some detail.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I have a presentation just to take you through, and I know attached to the meeting agenda was all of the draft business plan and the cover report. So I'll just run through a presentation to pick out some of the key points of this business plan refresh. So the business plan itself, you may remember I came along last January and presented to you the business plan for the next 5 years. And this is part of our annual refresh programme, because when you're sitting at a 5-year business plan, things will always change year on year. So we've committed to bring a refresh. This year's refresh is a bit more extensive because there have been quite a range of opportunities and challenges over the last year. But you'll remember in that last business plan, there were a number of key objectives set, and some of those were around maximising opportunities, both with Bath Council and some of our partners, particularly some of our council partners like South Gloucestershire and North Somerset Council, expanding those partnership opportunities across other public bodies and maybe aligned private landholders, sustaining the growth in the shareholder returns in line with the shareholders' aspiration, and that moved from 1 million to 2 million by the end of the annually by the end of the 5 years, and committing to provide this annual update. So if we just move over. So the refresh will focus on the range of the core strengths we've committed to around delivering homes to good space standards, maximising housing delivery where possible, leading on energy efficiency and sustainability, enabling strong public sector collaboration, supporting vibrant and responsive communities, and returning profits to our partners. And that's not just Baines, we also make financial returns to our other council partners, particularly North Somerset and South Gloucestershire. The update provides our first sort of report on social value objectives and how we're delivering against some of those social value objectives. It talks about our new company that we've just set up with Bath Council around Aquis Regeneration for the 2 key Bath Quays sites at Bath Quays North and Bath Quays South. and gives you some updates around our pipeline and our financial projections. So now we come to the sort of real challenges and opportunities that have come up over the last 12 months for Aquis. So we have developed a very successful partnership with the NHS. In fact, we acquired our first NHS site over at Keynsham House Centre, a small piece of land for about 7 units, and we completed on that in November. So that is now going through the design and planning process, and we hope to be delivering there in 2027. We're seeing increasing interest from neighbouring councils, so as well as South Gloss and North Somerset, we've also been talking to councils like Wiltshire and Gloucester City. So there is more and more interest in what Aquis are doing. We've seen a number of emerging private land promotion opportunities. So these are landowners who are aligned to the Aquis outcomes, who don't just want necessarily to maximise profit. They're looking at leaving legacies in their communities and how their land can be used to do that. We've established the limited liability partnership for Baines regeneration sites over at Bath Quays. We've been able to manage to some degree our portfolio. Because we've got a large portfolio now, that helps us mitigate the risk if certain things go wrong. But we also can see that there is huge long-term growth potential for the company. We've got about the potential for about 1,300 units of housing if all of those sites can come through for delivery. So what are the challenges? We've had quite a few challenges over the last year. We've seen a range of changes in priorities for council sites, and that's with all our council partners. We've seen challenges around the prolongation of the planning process. We've seen the impact of sort of enhanced governance requirements for the councils working together. That's taken quite a long time to secure. There's been a lot of uncertainty around Homes England funding, and even now that's only just becoming clear as to how their funding will be allocated going forward. So that's meant a lot of difficulty in getting funding from Homes England where we've needed that to secure sites. We've also had to align with our partner decisions, so every time we need decisions on any of our partner sites, not only do we need decisions through our shareholder Baines, but we also need to go through those councils' governance processes, through their scrutiny and cabinet and approval processes. And what that meant is that our units in delivery have dropped to a very low level, and in fact our lowest ever level. We've only got 10 units in delivery at the moment. But as I said, we have 1,300 units in potential. Now, all of these challenges are reflected in our pipeline and our financial projections over the next couple of years. It takes quite a long time from acquiring a site to actually getting to building a site to being in a position where you're selling units and generating cash. We have to remember that that timeline can be years between the site acquisition and actually selling completed units to new homeowners. So in terms of our social value outcomes, these are set out in a bit more detail in the business plan itself, but we've tried to align our outcomes to the council priorities around preparing for the future, delivering for local residents and focusing on prevention. I won't go into all the detail, but you can see some of those are around delivering the right homes in the right place. Around 30% of our projected pipeline will be affordable. Sustainability, our Manor Gardens development, which was completed last year over in Frenchay with South Gloucester Council, all of those properties were EPCA and were probably some of the most efficient houses that our contractor at the time, Vistry, has built. We've delivered for local residents, so we use our local supply chain wherever possible. So we're looking at contractors within a 20-mile radius of Baines. We've looked at local opportunities, so we do have opportunities when we release a new development for sale. There is a local residents first period where only local residents can buy those properties, so they get the first opportunity. In terms of focusing on prevention, we've got things like tenure-blind developments. If you were to walk in developments, you would not see the difference between the affordable or the social homes and the market homes. They're all tenure-blind in that respect. And we've done a lot of work with Baines Council, in particular on the Local Authority Housing Fund and acquiring properties for resettlement of refugees. So they're just some of the sort of wider social value things we've delivered on top of just delivering houses and shareholder returns. In terms of governance, this really just shows you the fact this is the structure of the Aquis group of companies. We have Aquis Developments, the private rental company. We have Aquis Construction, the housing delivery company. And we now have, as of November last year, the new Aquis Regeneration Bath Quays LLP, which will deliver those sites over at Bath Quays North and Bath Quays South. A lot of reasons we've done that is because it separates risks and liabilities. It's financially very, very efficient for delivering those housing regeneration schemes, and is a much easier route to allow us to reinvest the profits within that company to support additional housing outcomes. And when we bring forward our business case for Bath Quays North, for example, you'll see that we will be proposing to deliver additional affordable housing on that site. At the moment, the planning is there is no affordable requirement because of viability, but we are going to be looking at that company structure to at least achieve policy compliant affordable housing on that site, which no other developer would likely do. So then coming on to what's changed. So the real change is that all of our 12 sites that we had with our council partners, they've all been delayed to varying degrees, or in some cases are actually no longer progressing. So without going for all of those, what you're seeing is projects either not progressing as per we expected in the business plan, or projects being deferred for various reasons, whether they're planning, governance, funding uncertainties, or sort of legal and governance issues between the councils needing to be firmed up. So those things are all now being very, very closely managed. So we've put in place something called an E26 action plan, which looks at every single action that is needed to get that site over to Aqueous for delivery. And we're working with all our council partners, but particularly with Matt and the team at Baines, to make sure all those actions are being really thoroughly and robustly taken forwards to make sure the sites come forward on time for delivery. And I think that's working well. So in terms of our pipeline analysis, what you see here, and I'm sorry, it's not really much bigger, but over on the right-hand side, this is a breakdown of our pipeline, and it's in three stages. Over on the right-hand side, and that tiny little slither, that are the sites that we have secure in our control and that are delivering units. And as I said, that's just 10 units at the moment. We then have a chunk, it's about 407 units in the probable, where the sites are either going through the planning process or we're going through a design, getting them ready to transfer to Aqueous for delivery. So there are about 407 units in that box. And then the pipeline box, these are the sites that are still at the very early stages. We're still either working on very early design or we're just working up the briefs with the relevant landholders, whether that's the councils or the private landholders, and that's about 601. So you can see our objective is to get those sites from the left-hand side of that bar chart over to the right, so we're into delivery, and once we're delivering and we complete those homes, they can then be sold and generate income. So these are some of our key sites that are in our business plan for delivery. And there's more detail in that, but you've got sites like Bath Quays North and Bath Quays South, where we're in the process of either transferring the land or very close to transferring the land so that we can crack on and start delivering. So Bath Quays North, we are currently very optimistic that we'll be starting on site in June of this year, and that's 96 apartments down on the riverside there. So that one's really progressing well. Then you've got other sites over on the right-hand side. We've got three key sites with North Somerset Council. We are in the final stages of putting in place those legal agreements between Baines Council and North Somerset Council that will allow the two councils to work together to then enable Aqueous to take those sites forward. That's taken a little bit of time to get in place, but that's nearly there. And we have three key sites, for example, with North Somerset Council. We've got another site, but on the left here, you can see that Charborough Road. That's another site with South Gloucestershire Council. That site is going to planning committee on the 3rd of March, and if approved, will then transfer to Aqueous. So that gives you a flavour of the whole range of sites that are in our pipeline that we're dependent upon taking forward for delivery. So in terms of the company's revenue, so you can see here we've got a chart that's really dipping off over the next couple of years and then growing rapidly. So, you know, by the end of the 5-year business plan period, our turnover, our revenue for the companies should be around about £50 million. But over the next couple of years, it's going to be very challenging because we're not selling houses over the next couple of years. We're planning them, we're starting to construct them, but we are crucially not selling them. And hence we see this sort of flat period over the next couple of years until all of those pipeline sites start coming through till we start actually selling and generating revenue. Now, the good thing is Aquis has been very successful over the last 6-7 years, so we have cash in hand, money in the bank that can help see us through this period. I mean, with any development, you always see these ups and downs. The whole point of having this much bigger pipeline is in the future, we will be able to mitigate some of those ups and downs. What you see on this next slide is the corresponding impact on our profits. So Aquis has been very profitable for the last 6 years. We've met all of our dividend aspirations to the council, £1 million every year for the last 6 years. And our aim is to grow that dividend to £2 million a year by the end of the period. So certainly when we get to the end of the period, that looks really positive. Profits are running at about £5 million a year, so we should easily be able to achieve the council's aspirations. For the next couple of years, though, it's going to be tough. You know, we're not selling houses, which we're going to have to see those developments through the pipeline, get them into delivery so that we can actually then start generating the revenues again to comfortably and fully have the cash to meet those dividends. So what are the shareholders' returns expectations? So bear in mind, these are just the Bain shareholder expectations. So our baseline target is £1 million a year, and then that target is stretched out over the next 5 years to eventually reach £2 million by 29-30. And you can see that by the end of the period, if that pipeline comes through, we'll comfortably be achieving the council's aspirations for those returns. But the next couple of years are going to be quite tricky. 25-26, I think it's probably unlikely we're going to be able to meet shareholder returns in full. We are looking at mitigations, and we will be looking at that at the end of the financial year to see how much of that we can meet from the cash and reserves and historic profits we've generated. 26-7, again, it's going to be challenging, but there is still time to look at that pipeline and look at mitigations to how we can generate that cash to help deliver that dividend. I think the key point is the long-term outlook is really, really positive there. So then just a final slide for me then in terms of risks. So what are the key risks? So as you can see, the big one in the middle are the risks around delay in conversion of the pipelines. Until that land transfers from our council and other public sector partners into our control for delivery, we cannot build houses. So the delay in the conversion of that pipeline is key for us. We need to get the land into our control and we need to get building. There are a range of other things that we've talked about before, things like interest rates. Actually, that's waning a bit because interest rates are coming down, they're moving in the right direction. Contractor risks. You may all have read in the news, there's been lots of small and medium-term construction contractors going bankrupt because of the challenges in the market. For us, we have to be really careful when we're engaging contractors to make sure they're going to be there to finish and build the houses, and we have a very robust process for that, for example. And then things like availability of funding. As that availability of funding, particularly for affordable housing from Homes England, becomes clearer, that should reduce. But we're coming off a period when it's been very unclear as to how that Homes England funding will be available going forwards. So that's a very quick run through from me. Over to any questions.
Thank you very much. Alex, I know you have a question, and then Saskia, and then Barrett.
Thank you very much. It's just kind of a quick one, really. It's good to see what you've got in the pipeline and things going on. I'm the councillor for Danes Lane, so I've worked quite a lot with you and your company, kind of, to make sure that's the best development it can be. So for future developments, what is Aquis planning on doing to kind of engage with communities, make sure we've got the right kind of housing for those communities? Like, what is currently in the plans for that kind of thing?
So there are two aspects to that. The first one is in terms of particularly our public sector partners. They provide us with a brief for what they want to see on their sites. So we don't just go in and build maximum gross development value, big, large, executive homes. We will build what the councils would like to see built on their land in that location. So that starts with that brief. We are also working increasingly, as that pipeline grows and as we work more and more with local communities, and we are seeing more landowners wanting to work with us. They have aspirations for their land. So we're not only working with those landowners, but the communities, and we are engaging a partner to work with us to help increasingly engage with those communities. But that's about not just looking at the things people don't want to see, but also looking at the things people do want and trying to bring out the people who want housing in their locality, because there is a shortage of housing for their families or their children in the future. So we're trying to do that as much as look at the issues that are a challenge to those local communities.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the update. I wanted to ask about affordable and social housing. So I understood that Bath Quays North wouldn't include any affordable housing, but you just said that it would, which is very good news. Could you please tell us more about how many of the 96 homes could potentially be affordable and how many could be social housing? Thank you.
So this is part of the issue around viability of sites. So Planning Committee, as was reported, was very unhappy that they were having to approve a planning application that had no affordable in it. But because of the viability issues, we couldn't secure the affordable through the planning process, which is why we took the decision for an LLP, a limited liability partnership, because that delivers us some tax efficiencies, which generates the cash to subsidise the affordable. It just so happened that we hadn't got the LLP set up before the Planning Committee, so the Planning Committee were not aware of how we were planning to deliver the affordable. And that's kind of new for us. You know, we signed the Housing Accord, which commits us, the Council, to looking at innovative ways of working and working more collaboratively with our partners. So this is something we've not done before, so I don't think anybody was up to speed. But where we are right now is we can't tell you exactly how much affordable will be provided because we don't know how much cash the development process will deliver us. But the aspiration is to ensure that it is policy compliant. So that's our aspiration. If we can get more than policy compliance, that would be brilliant. But the source of funding is always, you know, how do you subsidise affordable? And that's the challenge. So we are looking for innovative ways of doing that. LLP is one of them, and as we get closer to delivery, we'll have a much better idea. So we can come back to you and let you know what that looks like, or you can keep an eye out.
Okay, we move on to Bharat.
I have a question for Councillor McCabe. It's good to hear you were mentioning EPCA, of course, because that's more affordable. In the same light, will the new builds have the ability to generate as much electricity as they can from their roof, number one, and number two, have electricity storage? Because both those elements, being able to generate as much as they can and to store cheap electricity when it is available in the dead of the night, also make those homes sustainable and affordable. And finally, Chair, I can't concentrate. That noise from that machine is really distracting me. I wonder if we should buy a new machine. Yeah, thank you.
I quite agree with you on the last point. I'm having to really listen to the speaker on the phone. I think all of everything you just said is how AQUIS achieve EPCA, so I'll let Tim answer.
Yes, indeed. So all of our new build homes are built to an EPCA standard, and that often means so we always use air source heat pumps. We use sort of internal ventilation systems and mechanical heating ventilation systems, triple glazing, all of those sort of structural things that we can do to deliver that. In Baines in particular, we include PVs on the roof as much as we can to reduce that. We haven't gone as far as battery storage yet. It is something we're looking at. We're looking at something called a zero bill scheme with Octopus Energy, which will include battery storage. But all of these things have to weigh up. These are all additional costs to the development, and whilst homeowners might be more attracted to energy efficient homes now and in the future, as to whether they actually generate a higher gross development value, i.e. are they willing to pay more for an energy efficient home, is still to be really come through in terms of what we're seeing in terms of what homeowners are willing to pay for their properties. So there's no premium at the moment on energy efficient homes. So we have to balance that off. And we know Baines has a very, very high sustainability requirement through planning policy. That's not necessarily the same in all of our other council areas. So again, we're working with those other councils to the briefs that they want in terms of the housing that we deliver for them.
Can I just add, Chair, from the Council's point of view, what we get in terms of our supported and social units is to this standard. So from the Council's point of view, the ongoing running costs or the running costs for people coming back into housing are very low. They are very cheap houses to live in that sense. You know, my winter electricity bill's 450 quid. I have got solar panels and batteries, and in the summer it's 50 quid. So when you can achieve EPTA, you're really settling at that very, very low cost to live in the houses. And so that's also bringing council costs down as well, so that we can continue to provide this sort of service.
Thank you. And Karen? Oh, okay. I have one question, and Saskia also has one. Anybody else? Okay. Eleanor? Okay, well, I'll bow to you first. I'll ask one at the end. Okay, Saskia?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the annual revenue return, which you mentioned. So this is meant to go back to council frontline services, which is fantastic. We need that more than ever, I think. We can all agree on that. So there was quite a bold statement that would improve going forward, which I obviously love to see, but I was wondering what that is based on, because it kind of said that it would be based on the assumption that there would be no further delays, but how can we be assured that that will be the case?
Okay, it is very much based upon the assumption that the sites come through as we have projected in our delivery timeline. So we've worked very, very carefully on that in updating this to recognise some of the challenges that have happened over the last 12 months. So we're really certain as we can be in terms of everything in our control to deliver those properties, get them sold and get the revenue generated. So that's the positive side. Obviously, there are still things that are out with our control. So the beauty of having that diversified pipeline going forwards is that if one project was to run a bit slower, as long as the other projects carry on, then actually you've got that mitigation. You can see our profit was looking at potentially hitting 5 million a year when we need to return 2 million a year to the council. So there's a good potential to see some projects delaying. But what we've seen over the past 12 months is that perfect storm when all 12 of our key projects have either stopped or been delayed. And we're hoping that that won't continue. And I think the E26 action plan we've got in place, where we're working really carefully with council officers and members to focus on those actions, is really helping.
And if I can add to that as well, you know, there's a lot of complexity, and I think where APRIS was working with other councils under purchase order agreements, it was very simple. But then I think we kind of hit a size of project that councils were a little bit uncomfortable with. Just doing it on purchase orders wasn't really what it was designed for. So everything kind of slowed down with North Somerset as we worked out legal agreements. So that slowed down those projects, but that process has just finished. We now have legal agreements that we can then use with the other councils locally. So although it's a perfect storm and we had that delay with North Somerset, actually it means that delay's been taken out of working with, say, Wiltshire or Somerset, whoever wants to work with APRIS in the future. So it has been a perfect storm, but the future does look much smoother. And I have a plunger, so because my job's about going around this council and trying to unblock the blockages as best I can.
Right, interesting image. Eleanor.
Thank you very much. I, of course, have to confess I was one of the councillors who voted against the North Quays project, and that was for the reason that we were informed that the public car park had to be provided, a subterranean public car park, and this meant that therefore it was not possible to provide the social housing, and some of us simply in all conscience could not vote for a project that had no social housing in it. So my question is, I sort of thought AQUIS was meant to work in conjunction with or in dialogue with council policies on the environment and ecology, and I'm really not able to understand the justification for a central Bath public car park being provided effectively at council expense. So that's my first question. My second question...
We stop with that and let them answer the first question.
Right, okay.
I can appreciate, you know, having been on committee myself, I can appreciate the frustration of members, and it was very well verbalised by members about having to approve something that had no social housing. But what we've tried to do in order to bring 6 and 7 forward is divorce 6 and 7 from 1 to 5. 1 to 5 has the requirement for the Avon Street car park to be provided in some form. And so by creating the LLP for 6 and 7 and Bath East South, we've been able to take 6 and 7 out of that complexity and so that we can bring it forward. So I can't really talk about what will happen with 1 to 5 because that's uncertain yet. Yeah, we haven't seen the application yet. But I think your point about, you know, the provision of car park meant we can't have social housing is what we've tried to address through the LLP and putting that in place so that we can provide affordable and social on 6 and 7 while by maintaining control of it through the LLP. Does that help?
That's interesting.
And your second question?
The second question, I'm very grateful to Councillor McCabe for such a full explanation, but I hope it's understood by the rest of this meeting who are not on the planning committee just how difficult the whole situation is really, and I can appreciate this question of time frames. The second question is, I don't quite understand why we have, I mean, it's good that we're working with North Somerset and South Gloss, but we don't seem to have anything in Midsummer Norton. I mean, these sites, what's being achieved, what's in the pipeline, what's prospective, leave the Somer Valley completely blank. Why? I mean, we need this kind of housing project, probably because of the levels of social deprivation in my ward in the Radstock area, even more than the centre of Bath.
I think we've got it, so Matt.
What I can say is that in terms of that pipeline you see, the projects I've flagged there are the ones that are more advanced, the ones we're more certain of. We are talking to a whole range of both public and private sector landowners about the opportunities and potential for acres to support them in the development of their land, and that does include sites across North East Somerset. As you can imagine, a lot of those conversations are at very early stages still, and they are still commercially confidential. As soon as we've signed all the relevant pieces of papers and they've progressed to enough where we can talk about them, then we can share a bit more information. But I can assure you, we are talking very proactively with landowners in North East Somerset.
Thank you. That was actually my question. My question was about, apart from Keynsham, there's 7 units in Keynsham. There's nothing in North East Somerset at all, but you've answered that question, so you haven't got one from me. Is there anything? Last one from Duncan, and then we stop.
Yeah, it's not quite a question. It's just about the presentation of future profits. When you see 2 million in 5 years' time, it's very easy for us to think, oh, that's double what it is now. But of course, with inflation all the way through for the next 5 years, 2 million in 5 years' time is worth a lot less than that. And I wonder whether, I know it's difficult to project in inflation, but you could take make some assumptions about that. And I think it would be helpful to see the figures. I think the technical term, as Chair may correct me, is net present value. You know, what are these future figures actually in today's money terms? And that would help us to understand, I think, more clearly how things are developing. Thank you.
Indeed, we can certainly do that. What we also don't show is the amount to which we've taken or scaled back our expectations to allow and provide for, you know, the potential for things not to go quite as we'd expected. And I can tell you, by the end of that period, we are contingenting out something like 50% of the potential revenue. Now, again, that's not very clear in the numbers we present today, but we can certainly share that information.
Okay, that brings us to the end of that item. Thank you very much, Tim, for your very clear and precise presentation, and thanks also to Matt for your contributions. And we will now move on to the next item, which is a budget discussion. I was pleased to see Mark appear pretty much on time, well done, for that item. So I'll hand over to Mark and his officers, Stuart, etc. as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. So, obviously, I'm here to open the discussion of the budget and financial outlook for 26-27, and which the report brings to this panel the parts of the draft budget that sit within your remit, particularly climate, waste, transport, built environment. I should highlight that I'm officially here because of the waste part of my portfolio rather than in my general finance and budget capacity. Detailed questions about other portfolios will either have to be addressed to any officers present or requests for written answers to be made to portfolio holders. I'm not here to answer detailed questions on all the portfolios in the budget. To set some context, the Chair asked me to be brief, so I'll try and keep this to 2 or 3 minutes. We're facing very large cost pressures over the next 5 years, and we need to set a credible, balanced budget for every year. For 26-27, the draft numbers in the medium-term financial strategy were showing a funding gap of 7.49 million, roughly 7.5 million. The government's fair funding review is going to leave us progressively worse off over the next 3 years. It looks like it adds an extra 2.5 million pressure to next year, so the gap would have been 5 million, not 7.5, were it not for the fair funding review. With over 5 million additional pressure the year after that, and another 4 or 5 million the year after that. So the 27-28 and 28-29 years, nearly half of the funding gap we're showing is due to the changes that are coming with the fair funding review. So due to fair funding, we will be something like 12 to 13 million worse off in 3 years' time than we were previously predicting. I also want to highlight a technical change related to fair funding in the figures, just because it might look a bit odd, and just to explain that up front, there's a move of 38.46 million of services and business rates grants into core funding. That's due to the simplification changes made in fair funding. One of the good things it does is simplify the way we're funded. So to be clear, that isn't giving us new money, it's a technical change as to where the money is reported. So it's moving it out of grant funding into our core funding, basically. The assumptions we've made in setting out the MTFS are laid out. Pay inflation at 3%, council tax at 2.99 with the adult social care precept at 2, contract inflation, demographic growth, interest rate assumptions, etc. Turning to the areas specifically within the remit of this panel, on savings and income, the main proposals relevant to the panel are changes around car parking charges, parking service improvements, waste service efficiencies and service optimisation, park and ride changes. On waste, you'll see proposals around route and round efficiencies, exporting surplus electricity from the solar array at Keynsham, recycling hub, a move to electric refuse vehicles during 2026, the alignment of managed housing establishments to fortnightly refuse collections along with the rest of the residents in the area, a proposal to review the capacity and usage at the recycling centres, including a change in operating hours. On the budget growth side, we've got waste staffing and running costs. There's inflation and borrowing costs tied to the vehicle replacement. There's an increase in the WEPA transport levy contribution. Those are just some highlights I've picked out. You may want to ask questions on other things. I'm happy to hear from the panel today on views about the realism of the proposals, the service impact, particularly on residents, and where you think the risks might sit before we then take this budget forward to the joint corporate PDS meeting at the beginning of February, and then to Cabinet, and finally to the Budget Council meeting later on in February. Thanks, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions? Duncan, then Saskia.
Thank you. In the public consultation that's taken place on the budget, one of the items was an idea of, on a rotating basis, closing the recycling centres at Welton and Bath. And although they have booking systems, it could mean that people decided to bring their waste and recycling across Baines to Keynsham on those days. Now, I think, as been pointed out, probably in the replies to your consultation, that's against our climate emergency approach to transport. It doesn't make sense for people to take their waste distances across the area. So, what's the likelihood of that actually finding its way into the final budget proposal?
I'm certainly taking that under consideration. I mean, yes, there was, the issues have been raised with it as a saving. I have to say, I mean, we are, as an area, we are, compared to our neighbours and across the country, we are very well provided for recycling centres at the moment, and probably a lot more than, or perhaps not a lot more, but more than would be normal or average across the country. As pressures increase, we have to look at savings like this. They have to be examined closely. I am looking at it seriously to see what we can do about it.
Okay, I have a very similar question, which I think is helpful if I put in now. Due to these cuts on the opening hours of the recycling centre, how often will Keynsham Recycling Centre be the only recycling centre open?
There wouldn't be. There is no plan for Keynsham to be the only recycling centre open at any point.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. And I think we've now...
Question on that one, is that okay?
Yes.
So would recycling vehicles that come to us on a regular basis, would they be taking more small items to recycle? So that stops people then having to go to recycling centres if they're closed?
Well, the curbside recycling already takes small items, small electrical items, for example.
Or they'd be taking more amount of...
I would be happy if they were. I mean, that's perfectly, I want to encourage people to use curbside recycling. If people use curbside recycling rather than taking things to the recycling centres, then that's great.
Okay, then we move on to Saskia.
Thank you. I've also got a question on waste. So one of the items in the budget is revising waste routes, and that's presented as a technical efficiency. But my question is, in practice, would that mean tighter rounds and less spare capacity? So this could obviously save money, but it could also reduce resilience and making failures more visible. So how robust is the modelling behind these savings, and are there any service reductions being assumed?
Sure, we're absolutely not proposing any service reduction. I mean, this is supposed to be we haven't reviewed the routes for a while. It's a review of the routes to make sure that they are optimal and efficient. There is no proposed reduction in service. I think the lead officer can confirm that.
Yeah, absolutely confirm. There's no reduction in service. This is about recognising the move to the Keynsham site, how we can utilise our vehicles the most effective way, and making sure that we deliver the best possible service for all residents within the area.
Okay, we move on to Karen.
I think this is more of a question for Chris, actually, and I just wanted a better understanding of the sustainable transport strategy, and you've got 4 items in there. It says more enforcement cameras, car club delivery, extra support for decided bus services and school streets. But you've got on there removal of a one-off growth. Can you just explain that so I have a better understanding of that, please? It's page 14.
Thank you, Councillor. The items are to be removed from the budget. The one-off enforcement cameras were a one-off growth item last year to buy additional cameras. Those cameras are now in the process of being allocated to sites, so that funding is no longer necessary. It was a one-off implementation. The second item, Car Club delivery, that is a programme of work that's going out shortly to procurement. So again, it was a time-limited piece of work. It's no longer needed for future years. However, the procurement of new Car Club opportunities will give us a more robust contract, and we'll see an increased offer for the whole of the area, including North East Somerset, in the next financial year. The extra support for supported buses, again, this is a very wide-ranging issue. This is about how we support buses generally within the area. The increase in the WECA transport levy request generally picks that up for future years, so it's removed again. One-off item will be picked up in the future bus funding through our partners at the West Lincoln Combined Authority. And the last item is funding for school streets. As you know, we're really, really pleased to be able to bring forward 4 school streets that are going to be live just after Easter this year. So that funding is no longer needed. That'll be in future programmes for future schemes, but we're really, really pleased to see them moving through the technical processes and to be on the ground just after Easter.
Thank you, Chris. That really is a good explanation. Thank you.
If I can just add to that, those items were allocated by Cabinet last year as one-off items because there was additional, after the final financial settlement was presented from central government, kind of quite late, it was sort of late Jan, early Feb. There was a little bit of one-off extra money available, and these were the things we allocated it to. So it was one-off money that we could use in order to push some of those things a bit further forward.
Can I ask, I thought there were only 3 school streets, so can you name the other one?
Thank you, Chair. The last one is Lime Gardens and Charmouth Road scheme that includes a school street element.
Oh, okay. That explains it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question on parking enforcement. Increased parking enforcement is very welcome and very much needed, especially in places outside of Bath city centre. We continue to struggle in Larkhill Square with enforcement on dropped curbs and tactile pavings, leading to significant barriers for disabled people to get around. And my question is around some parking enforcement is done on motorbikes, I understand. This comes at great cost, and there's additional issues with recruitment, obviously, because people would need to have a motorbike licence. My question is, would the Council consider investing in the usage of electric pedal cycles for Bath, obviously not for North East Somerset? This is done very effectively by Avon and Somerset Police and has been for years, so there is kind of local knowledge. This could save money and time and improve staff satisfaction and health as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we recognise the challenges that enforcement in the outer areas always brings to our staff. We utilise a range of options, including cars and mopeds at the moment. They're all linked to technology that reads the number plates as the officer goes around to make sure that we identify vehicles that are in contravention of certain regulations, and then they get off their bike to issue the penalty charge notice in line with the regulations. We have considered the use of electric bikes. Unfortunately, we can't add the technology to the electric bikes at the moment. Now, that doesn't mean we wouldn't continue to look at it and continue to increase the use of those sort of options. It's all about time and efficiency, really. If it takes a long time for people to get to particular areas, they're not spending their time improving the traffic flow and making sure that that anybody who is parking illegally is being dealt with verbally in first instance with a penalty charge notice if they don't. We also recognise there's a lot more restrictions with the growth in residence parking zones and the changes, and these proposals reflect the need to increase the numbers of officers on the ground to support the city and North East Somerset very clearly.
Okay. Yes, Saskia? And then another.
Thank you. Quick question on park and ride. Increased charges are being suggested for those not using the bus. I understand that this is currently not enforced, so we rely on the goodwill of people and their knowledge, actually, of that they have to pay. So my question is, how can we ensure that this will actually be paid going forward?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we use a range of different technology using ANPR and looking at the option of moving to a off-bus ticketing solution to make it easier for people to pay for parking in isolation and for when they use the park and ride service. We do monitor those who use the site and don't use the bus, if that makes sense. So we do issue some enforcement, but it is challenging and we have to spend a lot of staff resource watching people to be able to confirm that. So the issue is around the use of the space. We want more and more people to use park and ride rather than driving into the centre of the city. That improves our congestion levels, our air quality issues, and the impact of the dominance of motor vehicles in public space. We want to be able to promote active travel and similar. So we're trying to get more people in the park and ride and balance that against the challenges of the enforcement levels that we have within the site.
Eleanor.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I could just have the patience of the committee for a minute. It's my great ambition to have a direct hospital flyer from the Ogdown Park and Ride down to the Red Lion, then up towards the Crem, and then over the hill and straight into the RUH. The bus services seem to be an apocalyptic secret, that they're not advertised, they're not known, and the number 4 is extremely erratic, as I can. And it isn't even labelled RUH, it's labelled Western or Bathwick, depending on which direction it's going in. If we publicised bus services and made them more efficient, I think we'd go a long way towards reducing air pollution and so on. So the question is, will you support a move to improve the bus services to the RUH and to encourage people to use the service? I nearly got run over yesterday by a lady who'd been circling round and round the RUH car park trying to pick up her elderly father and getting lost and going backwards up a one-way area and so on. We just don't sell the bus services, in my opinion, as they should be. So I was wondering if your budget would include that sort of provision to make it more known about the bus services and to encourage people to use them. But mind you, if you spend half an hour waiting for a bus at the Victoria Hall in Radstock like I did this morning, natural instinct would be to get your car out. So I would like to see a detailed commitment to improving bus services and making them known and getting them to run efficiently. And I was wondering if you might revert to the previous principle before WECA, that the bus company actually got fined if their buses arrived very late in the bus station. So that's just some food for thought.
I think some of those things are probably beyond our powers.
What I was wanting to know was whether the parking charges, this really alarms me, and if you had done any study of the impact of the parking charges in North East Somerset on small businesses. I think the same probably apply in Keynsham too, because I know of businesses who say it's the last straw, they can't take the parking charges for their staff. I'm talking about staff needing to park, of course.
Okay, thank you,
Anna.
Anna.
Have you done a study on that?
Do you have any comments on that, sir?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's well recognised nationally that well-managed parking facilities encourages high turnover of vehicles, which generates additional economic viability and vitality within market towns. It's always a really difficult balance to recognise the requirement for those who have vehicles and wish to park for free and manage that against those who have no access to a vehicle and have to pay for other forms of transport such as buses, trains, etc., etc. We haven't done any dedicated work on the impact on small businesses, but we do look at national data and use data such as the Association of Town Centre Management, who have seen no direct impact between low parking charges and economic vitality and vibrancy within any particular area. We do continue to monitor though, and if any evidence comes forward, we will consider it as part of the process.
Okay, I've been. Can I just say something before you speak? So I've just been talking to Kerry here, and he points out that a lot of the bus services are related to WECA and are not part of Bain's responsibility, but he does say that in respect of advertising services and trying to get people to move from their cars into an efficient and well-known bus service, there is a £42 million grant over 3 years, and there is discussion about how that grant is spent at the next WECA committee meeting. Gentlemen.
Just to add to that, I was going to highlight, I mean, thank you, you've done it for me basically, but I was going to highlight the fact that obviously the buses are primarily a WECA issue. You know, we can shove in more subsidy, which we are doing in this budget, but it is primarily a WECA issue.
Yeah, and I mean we have done quite a lot on the park and ride in Newbridge, successfully increasing our revenue in that area, and obviously stopping people getting on the buses.
And to be clear, park and ride is is directly managed by us.
Okay, so I saw Karen and Saskia. So Karen.
Sorry, this is just following up on parking enforcement, and I think Chris knows my bugbear about getting double yellow lines down, and then we don't have parking enforcement in especially rural areas, and I'm mentioning more Peas down St John. So what's my point? Sorry, I've lost it. So I reported parking issues back in December through the proper process. I had to chase again in January before I got a reply. Is there a quicker system that councillors can report offending vehicles?
Thank you, Councillor. I think the direct emails to our services are available, and any response should be timely back to a councillor where we have issues. What we do with that data once it's received, though, is put it within our what we call our POP list, Priority Organised Patrolling list, to make sure that we visit the locations that have been highlighted by councillors and members of the public, to make sure that we are reacting to the needs of the community. Now, we sound a bit like the police at times, saying we can't be everywhere, but making sure that we do visit the areas where there are problems is core to our business. So if you haven't had a response, I'll follow up with the team to make sure you get a response.
I did get a response, but it took 3 weeks before I got that response.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I had quite a good update on that response, but I think 3 weeks is a long time for me then to go back to the resident to say, this is what's happened.
You always have my number, Karen. Councillor, please pass it through to me if you don't have a response in a timely way.
We're very informal, don't worry about that. Saskia.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about the Clean Air Zone. I understand that the Clean Air Zone is forecast to run a deficit of 800k in 2026-27 from earlier papers. I don't see this reflected in this budget papers. So my question is, where can we find out more about the Clean Air Zone and its finances? I asked about a year ago for the Clean Air Zone operations and finance to come to this panel, but that didn't go anywhere. So I guess my question is, why can we not see that in the budget papers?
Thank you, Councillor. The Clean Air Zone, whilst the numbers of contraventions of vehicles that contravene it are reducing over time, we have made adequate allowance within reserves from the scheme, so you don't see the deficit within the papers. We put money aside when it was recovering more, and that will keep the operation going during the end years of the service before we decommission or move on to any other scheme.
Can I just comment on that as well? Yeah, so just you'll know that we've used money from the CAS reserve to pay for things like Scholars Way and Cycle Scheme, but but a very significant proportion of that reserve was set aside for precisely this, because the expectation was that it would become successful and therefore less profitable. The aim was never to make a huge profit, it was to stop polluting vehicles coming into the middle of the city. So, yeah.
Sounds very sensible to me. I think that brings us to an end to your item, gentlemen. So thank you very much for your clarity and wisdom and humour occasionally. That was lovely. So you're welcome to leave. I'm sure you've got better places to be. And thank you again. So we move on to the item 11, which is air pollution and health. Remembering the 3 statements at the start of the meeting on that issue. And we have a presentation, and Sarah is here to lead the discussion on that with Jackie and Mark. So, yeah, we'll just have a few moments while we get the electronic wizardry to work.
Okay, we'll get on to the clean air item then. So I'm just going to introduce this. The idea is that this is a policy development item as opposed to scrutiny. So that's why I've brought these experts with me, expert officers. So I'll introduce Alexi Turner, Michelle Tett, and Aled Williams. I was getting stuck there. So I'll just introduce it, and then I'm going to read another statement, which is from our Director of Public Health, who we invited to attend, but who can't make it. So, in the past, air quality in many parts of Bath and North East Somerset has often been poor. We've heard already today about Bath itself, which sits in a bowl with deep street canyons that trap pollution. But not only in Bath, we've also had air quality action plans in place due to pollution in Salford, Keynsham, Farrington Gurney and Temple Cloud. In recent years, we've had some real successes on air quality, so much so that in 2024, we lifted the air quality management areas we had in place in Salford and Keynsham in line with relevant legal guidance, and are currently being asked to consider lifting the air quality action plan in place in Farrington Gurney. So this led us to start to think about how we in Bath and North East Somerset can continue to protect all of our residents' health, given the evolving state of medical understanding of the seriousness of the threat posed by air pollution. In 2025, the government issued a revised National Air Quality Strategy framework, which places the expectation on local authorities to use their powers to improve air quality, setting the expectation that authorities take preventative as well as reactive action, and newly recommending that we prepare a local air quality strategy to protect residents who live in parts of the authority not covered by an air quality action plan. Meanwhile, as we've heard from some of the public who submitted speeches today, evidence of the impacts of air pollution on human health is accumulating, with scientific understanding moving on fast, even over the last 5 years. We know how keen you as PDS panels have been to be involved in shaping initiatives from the start, which is why we are coming to you this morning with this policy development discussion. We're going to present you with some of the evidence of the health impacts of air pollution, then talk to you about the UK national targets and Bath and North East Somerset's current performance against those. We'll then take a look at other targets used internationally, as well as a number of UK local councils who have adopted more stringent targets than the national ones. And we'd really like to hear your views on the extent of ambition that we in Bath and North East Somerset should have for the health of our residents, and how we should be incorporating that into any future clean air strategy. So with that, I'm going to move on to reading the statement from Rebecca Reynolds, who is the Director of Public Health. So had she been here, this is what she would have said. Air pollution is the most important environmental threat to health. It makes people sick, is a major cause of chronic ill health, increases pressures on social care and the NHS, shortens lives, and places a burden on the economy. Exposure to air pollution affects health throughout the life course, from preconception to older age. Evidence has shown that exposure during pregnancy, infancy, childhood and adolescence can affect how organs develop and increase the risk of long-term conditions in adulthood. Among adults, air pollution damages many organ systems, including the respiratory and cardiovascular systems. Although air pollution affects everyone, it doesn't affect all parts of the population equally. People living in poorer neighbourhoods and on lower incomes are at higher risk than others because they often live, learn or work in areas with higher traffic pollution, have less access to quality housing and green spaces, and are more likely to have existing medical conditions which can be worsened by poor air quality. Children are particularly vulnerable. They breathe in more air in proportion to their body weight, spend more time closer to ground-level pollution sources such as vehicle exhausts, and have limited ability to reduce their own exposure to air pollutants. There are no safe levels of air pollutants. This means that continued reductions in exposure will bring benefits by protecting all of our residents, particularly those who are more vulnerable. As a local authority, we have the opportunity and responsibility to be ambitious in our collective action to continue to improve air quality across Bath and North East Somerset, setting a downward trajectory for key pollutants in line with World Health Organisation targets for future years. So that's the end of Becky Reynolds' statement. And so with that, I'll hand over to the team who are going to present some of the evidence and data to you. Is it Michelle? Are you going to lead, Michelle, or Alexi? Alexi.
Thank you. The key pollutants impacting air quality within Bath and North East Somerset are particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide. And this presentation will focus on these pollutants and the impacts of them on our residents. This slide just aims to raise a few key differences between the pollutants. So nitrogen dioxide is a gaseous pollutant that is typically more localised, and we see that concentrations move further away from the roadside. Particulate matter is a complex mixture of solid particles that kind of derive from man-made or natural sources, and it's a much more transboundary pollutant, often travelling long distances. And this image here just aims to show the difference in size between PM2.5 and PM10. So we can see that PM2.5 is a much smaller pollutant. Looking at the health impacts of these pollutants, we can see that the air pollution has a negative effect on health throughout the course of life, and as a result, it is the biggest environmental risk to public health. Now, we can see that there are many health impacts throughout the course, from kind of pre-birth right the way through to children's, adults and elderly. We also know that air pollution can lead to the development of health conditions such as asthma, diabetes and dementia. And as a result, there is no safe level of pollution. Particulate matter pollution in particular can have many adverse health impacts, particularly depending on the size of the pollutant. So we can see in the image PM2.5 and PM10 are mentioned. Now PM2.5 is particularly dangerous to health due to the size of the particles. So due to the size, they are able to penetrate the linings of the lung and enter straight into the bloodstream, affecting the heart, the brain, the lung and kind of other organs and systems. And again, this is why the World Health Organisation have recognised that there is no safe threshold below which no adverse effects would be anticipated. We know that air pollution has a particular impact on the most vulnerable within our community and a disproportionate impact as well. Now, Ella Kissy-Debris was a 9-year-old girl from London who tragically passed away following exposure to dangerously high concentrations of particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide as well. And Ella was the first person to have air pollution listed as the cause of death on her death certificate. Now, as mentioned in our kind of previous statements, children are at higher risk due to their developing respiratory systems. We know that they're closer to the ground and they also struggle to deal with pollution as well. And again, exposure is distributed unevenly in the UK, so we know that those who are socioeconomically deprived are often subject to the worst impacts of air pollution.
There are various different standards and targets. Obviously, we comply with the UK legislation, which is shown in the table. Within the District of Baines, we are demonstrating we are meeting these objectives. So we're quite keen and ambitious to look forward at what this could look like. The EU have proposed the limits in the table, and they are working towards the World Health Organization guidelines, which, you know, is obviously a more tightened requirement than what the UK are currently looking for. And I'm not aware that the UK are committed to the World Health Organization guidelines, and obviously the EU are, so it's just to bring that to your attention. The other local authorities within England have obviously adopted what we're referring to as the local targets. These are based on the World Health Organization guidelines, and within them guidelines there are instrument targets, and obviously, as you can see, this is what other local authorities have proposed. So again, these are again tighter than the UK limits. And with that, we are then looking at some forecasting to support our targets.
So as Michelle mentioned, the WHO guidelines are extremely stringent and a lot tighter than those that are currently within the UK. So to understand our nitrogen dioxide concentrations, we've conducted some forecasting based on the DEFRA roadside NO2 projection factors. Now, to meet the WHO endline targets, they have produced a number of interim targets, and the final interim target is 20 micrograms per cubic metre. Now, the blue concentrations on the graph are our monitored concentrations at our diffusion tube sites across the whole of Baines, and the orange bars are our forecasted concentrations. So we can see that the number of sites exceeding 20 micrograms is continuously decreasing, and in 2030 we have forecasted that 11 sites would exceed that final interim target of 20 micrograms. Moving on to particulate matter, again the same applies. So our blue concentrations are those that are monitored. So in 2024 for both PM10 and PM2.5, you can see that our concentrations were below the UK targets and the EU targets. We can see that for PM2.5 we are above the WHO guidelines, but again these concentrations are projected to decrease continuously.
Therefore, we are suggesting and asking for your support to introduce local targets. These local targets are based on the World Health Organization guidelines. Obviously, we would be considering what other local authorities have done and what the EU and World Health Organization limits are when we're making our decisions, but this is what we're suggesting, and we'd like your support in regards to us looking at local targets. And then the only other thing is that we would like to introduce, with the local targets, to come into a clean air strategy. The clean air strategy would then look at the whole of the district, and the local targets that would be suggested would be in that document. The clean air strategy would be a document that we would use to influence other policies and raise the profile in and around air quality. I think that's probably everything.
Okay, sorry.
For you to consider, really. So whether we should be identifying and adopting local targets and how ambitious they should be, and whether we should prepare a clean air strategy.
Okay, thank you. Very exciting and formative, and thank you for the opportunity to formulate a policy going forward. That's very helpful. Now, Barrett had his hand up wildly, and Duncan and Anna as well. So, Barrett.
Thank you. I'm interested to know about PM 2.5s and below. We've got all manner of new engineering and other processes, and I wonder if we are actually looking at sources of PM 2.5s and below. What I'm getting at is we know the usual culprits, and we know what we know, but we may not know what we don't know. And I just wonder, with new processes, new ways of making things, new engineering products, that there may be sources of PM 2.5s that we're not even looking for.
In the Clean Air strategy that we're proposing, we'd like to explore source apportionment around particulate matter, so that would give us a bit more of a localised understanding of what's happening. So with that, obviously, we'd be able to put out more monitors around a local area, because obviously we only have the one monitor at the moment that captures. But that will enable us to look at what is causing them, maybe not hotspots or peaks, but to show what the particulate matter is. And then we could work with, if it's, say, industry or agriculture, and try and understand what's happening, and also understand what changes they are naturally making themselves within their professions.
Yeah.
Thank you. See, what I'm getting at is, by the time you find your PM 2.5s and below, then you start looking. What I'm getting at is, it might be a smarter idea to look at where new engineering processes are being implemented, being put in. Are they generating without knowing that these are 2.5s? So look, as a complete another one, we've got these cosmetics which use nanoparticles, and we know that these nanoparticles can penetrate into cells, and instead of sort of putting out warnings about, be careful how you use this cosmetics or whatever, it's much better to say, is there a health implication further to creating nanoparticle cosmetics? See what I'm getting at? In other words, we know where the industries are, we know where the industrial estates are, we know where the manufacturing process is or whatever, and it might be smarter to look there and say, is this the place that emits nanoparticles, 2.5s, without even knowing that they're doing it?
Thank you very much. So another part of the team look at environmental permitting. Causing pollution. I think it's fair to say that we've got an amazing nitrogen dioxide monitoring network at the moment. Part of the clean air strategy, if you recommend that it's going to be implemented, is to look at PM10s and PM2.5s. The difficulty with PM2.10s and 2.5 is exactly what you've said, which is it's a dust, it's a thing, but we don't know where the thing has come from potentially. Is it salt from the sea? Is it ammonia from farming? Is it fertilizer? So, we'll have to ask Mr. Major there whether he can release the revenue funds in order for us to do some GCMS or, spectroscopy to identify the source of the information. But that's something which we could definitely look at through the Clean Air Strategy.
If I may, I'll finish. I personally think it's a smarter way to identify your mass spectroscopy or other, because if you identify, you know where to put in the preventative measures, rather than to find it and then, where is it coming from? Thank you.
Always good to have an expert with us. Appreciate it. I think you deserve a good bash at it, and you had that. So, Duncan?
Thank you. My question really is about the modelling, the future projections for nitrogen dioxide. Now, we will be shortly adopting a local plan that expects us to have 28,000 new houses in this area, and many of them will be situated along the A4. that would generate a lot of extra traffic. So does your modelling actually take into account the great growth in housing that's about to happen?
Thank you. So our modelling uses a national modelling factor. So it doesn't consider any local interventions moving forwards. It does consider kind of a traffic growth in line with national trends and considers like fleet composition changes and kind of policy impacts in terms of Euro standards and things. But it doesn't necessarily focus on large local changes.
Thank you. On a completely different point, and apologies for missing the presentations from public speakers earlier who may have talked about these things. I have a resident who lives next door, terrace house, but next door to somebody who uses a wood-burning stove, and it's pretty certain that wood is used that isn't properly treated as well. And I know this lady that I'm talking about has been very concerned about the impact on her health if she sits in the garden or whatever. I believe there is a policy in Bath, but correct me if I'm wrong. Could you look at policies that would help this lady in North East Somerset so that there can be some enforcement action?
Just to interrupt, there was one of the speakers earlier was talking about wood-burning stoves, actually. So your point is well made.
Yeah, I think it's great. We want to hear your suggestions, so we can certainly take that away and look at whether we can incorporate points about that into a clean air strategy if you think we should produce one.
Okay, I think we are now with Anna.
Sorry, Chair. In the meantime, your residents can get in touch with the Environmental Protection Team because there's a piece of legislation called statutory nuisance, and the team can investigate that in the meantime without the necessity for a smoke control area or something which is down the line. So it's worth them engaging with us now.
Can I ask, you have, they're tubes, are they, that you put outside properties and that sort of thing? Yeah, I was involved with a piece of casework about that, so that's a good way to go. And I was just wondering, going back to the point about finance that you raised, Ali, a few moments ago, how comprehensive are your investigations on the particulates as opposed to the nitrates?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Diffusion tubes are a great way to monitor nitrogen dioxide, and I think nitrogen dioxide is a lot easier to monitor than particulate matter. Diffusion tubes are a great low-cost way to effectively monitor across the district, and we can really easily deploy tubes. Particulate matter is a lot harder to monitor in that the equipment's a lot more complex, and it can also vary on things depending on power supplies, if they're solar powered, is there enough sunlight available? And so, yeah, our monitoring is a lot greater for nitrogen dioxide, but we do review our locations continuously, and the same for particulate matter where we can as well with some of our mobile analysers.
Okay, that's really, I don't normally do this as chair, so we butt in, but I'm going to carry on. So Duncan's point about his neighbour, or the person that lives close to him, how could you monitor that? Could you put some sort of, is it possible to put some sort of particulate device near to actually measure the impact of this wood-burning stove?
Yeah, so we have some Zephyr monitors, which are mobile monitors. So we have one permanently located on Gay Street, and we have two that are solar powered as well. These analysers are indicative, so they kind of give us an indication of pollutant levels. But again, the locations kind of these monitors will vary depending on whether we've something that we're able to fix the monitor onto, whether there's a power supply, if we're able to get sunlight there, if it's solar powered.
You don't have an extensive number of these, I'm guessing?
We do not, no.
Okay, I'll stop talking now, you'll be pleased to know. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. It's kind of leading on with what Brett and Duncan were saying, and a bit of a cautionary tale about the strategy, which obviously I'm fully in support of. The monitoring, I've gained a little bit of advice and talked to quite a few people when I saw this on the agenda, and gained a few opinions of different stakeholders. And basically, one is around where you're monitoring, so thank you for explaining how you do it. I can't help but think some of these are more Bath-related. Sorry to sound like a nurse counsellor again, but that's kind of what my job is. So it would be great when you develop the strategy to widespread different places, because I can't help but think in the rural communities we do have diesel trucks. Often I live on an A road, so there's that. And the other cautionary tale, I guess, is around enforcement, because it's wonderful to have these strategies and this data and all these great intentions, but if people are still breaking the rules, then so what? So yeah, that would be definitely my big points. I am very nervous that we will find hotspots and then traffic will be diverted through my beautiful Chew Valley, but that's for another conversation for another time. And my last point's around poverty. So my normal job is working with respiratory patients in the community, and air pollution is a huge thing within my job. And majority of my caseload are patients with COPD, and that makes a profound impact on them. The other big link with COPD is poverty. So I think any kind of strategy as a council, and I'm mindful of the levers we can pull as a council aren't massive or enough, but can we please look at poverty as an overarching theme here as well, because the two, unfortunately, are completely linked. Thank you.
Absolutely, we can. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Can I have, your point about rural communities, were you making a point for rural communities to be particularly included in the strategy or excluded?
100%. I mean, thinking about enforcement, and I think one of the speakers was talking about fires and bonfires and that kind of stuff. We obviously have a lot of people that burn plastics and just the wrong kind of fuel, like Duncan was saying. That happens all the time. I don't know how much of impact that would be compared to urban landscape, but I know that it hurts my lungs. So yeah, there is that, but also the fact that we are so reliant on vehicles in the countryside, and then we have big farming vehicles along with dairies that have deliveries, and I know my colleague Simon McComb in Harptree and Mendip Ward is really upset about a lot of the larger vehicles going through on the A368. So there's a lot of thoughts here around diesel. I do have a question though, because obviously you can't answer that without the strategy. But as a percentage, as impact on health specifically, how much is residential individual impact, as in bonfires, barbecues, stoves, that kind of thing, versus traffic? Is that kind of, do you know that as a kind of how much is more impactful, or are we just not sure at all at this point?
They're looking at me and I'm looking at them, which probably answers your question. I think it's reasonable for you to ask, and we'd be more than happy to take that away to do a meta-analysis on the research that shows kind of, the presentation touched on regional, didn't it? PM2.5, and I've mentioned sea salt and agricultural, compared to what you're saying about is the diesel vehicle driving past or the plastic being burnt locally. So we can take that away 100%, and it'll feature heavily if you agree that a clean air strategy is something we should look at. But can I just come back to quickly address the question about monitoring in the districts compared to maybe in the city? Historically, we've looked at nitrogen dioxide in the main, because that's what we were reaching on in terms of not meeting the objective target. We're asking you whether you should think that we should consider a local target, which goes beyond that, not only for NO2, but for particulates. That will change what we do as a team, because our discussions have been primarily, of course, we've discussed PMs, but it's been, okay, how are we going to reduce NO2? And PM is a different beast. We need to monitor differently for it, and the source is different from it. So I think there's a lot for us to learn, actually, as a team. And well up for that.
We will have a vote at the end on your recommendation, but I think there are a lot of other interesting questions before we get to that stage. But time is pressing, so please keep your answers short, or as short as you can. Saskia is next, then Eleanor, then Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I very much support setting local targets. The targets in the presentation was the first time I've seen them, so I've tried to process them. They look ambitious, which is very good. My question would be, one of my questions would be about the timing. We're obviously in 2026. Is it 2030 timing? Is that realistic? That's one of my questions. It does obviously coincide with the journey to net zero timeline, which is good because they are connected very closely. I wanted to come back on Councillor Pankania's comment about what we do not know. I guess I wanted to come back to the public speakers saying that we do know about wood-burning stoves and bonfires, and we have that knowledge. So I would say let's focus on what we do know, because we do not need a lot of resources then to act on that. That would be my take on that. And then I have a very specific question about school streets. We're going to 4 will be implemented, which is great. Would it be possible to do some monitoring of air pollution before and after implementation, so that we can hopefully show that that is a really good implementation in terms of improving children's health?
Thank you. I was wondering, I really appreciate this report and the facts and the figures and the patient explanations. It's really very helpful, but we want to translate it into practical issues. I've got 2 areas. One, farm vehicles, having been stuck behind a tractor yesterday. Do we do any sort of monitoring, or is there any sort of policy? These, modern farm vehicles are enormous, and you can't. Yeah, that was
ask that one first.
Question. And this is related because, of course, I represent Westfield, and we get these vehicles going through. What can be done about the high levels, which were monitored about 8 years ago and were found to be as bad as the London Road in Bath? So could we have, is it possible for you to come and do North East Somerset monitoring?
Any comments?
Just quickly, officers didn't get a chance to respond to my questions.
I apologise. Sorry. You first then, Saskia, then we'll come on to...
Yeah, thank you. So going back to your first point about whether the targets are realistic, I think in the targets outlined in the presentation for your consideration, we wanted them to be ambitious, but also achievable in terms of that's kind of what the forecasting aim was. We recognise that the final WHO guidelines are extremely ambitious, so that 2030 target is almost our kind of roadmap to getting there. I think, as Alan said previously, we monitor nitrogen dioxide a lot more than we are currently able to monitor PM as well. So it's about striking that balance between ambition but also developing our own knowledge on particulate matter as well.
Okay, so Eleanor's question about farm vehicles.
Regarding farm vehicles, I don't think we monitor them specifically. But I would imagine they'd be picked up through kind of weight restriction contraventions if they're passing on those roads, if that's monitored. And regarding the monitoring, we have monitored nitrogen dioxide throughout Westfield. Our diffusion tubes are reviewed annually in line with concentrations. So I believe that if they have been removed, it would be because concentrations are under the UK limit values. And as Ali's mentioned, all of our previous monitoring locations and their concentrations can be viewed on an interactive map on our website.
I was just going to say, if councillors are worried about a particular location with regard to nitrogen dioxide, you just have to contact the team, because diffusion tubes are really quite economical to to put in, and we can put them in if there's a cause for concern. I mean, in terms of monitoring particulates, that is harder, and some places are doing that. So I'm aware that Wiltshire are currently involved in a research project where they've got a lot of members of the community who have got particulate monitoring devices at home and who are monitoring, and you can actually see them online. I can't remember what the link is, but I'll find it and send it to you if you like. You can look and you can actually see in one particular village if somebody has lit a wood fire, you can see the impact. So if we adopt policy, if we can use that to leverage some money, some budget, some money through the budget setting and so on, then those are the kind of initiatives we could be looking to do around particulates going forward.
Okay, thank you. Hang on. Karen's next, I think.
Point of order about members of the public cannot see us because they can only see the presentation, I've been told.
Well, that's beyond my control. Is that true? Are the members of the public able to see the questioners?
Yes, when you press the microphone.
Okay. Thank you, Saskia. So we move on to Karen.
Thank you, Chair. So mine's a two-part question. We spoke about bonfires and we spoke about solid fuel use. We know that bonfires are more common in the summer months. Can we look at putting a policy in place that can be enforced to stop this? And also, we've got a bylaw out there about smoke against over highways, but nobody takes any notice of it. So we really do need to enforce this going forward. And my other one is about solid fuel and those using log burners. Is there anything in place financially to support those on low income that wishes to swap fuel use?
So in regards to your first query around bonfires, I think it would be really useful if you can either encourage residents to report it so we can investigate, or if you let me know, we can do perhaps a leaflet drop and make residents aware. But it would be dealt with under the statutory nuisance regime, so we do have powers to look at that already. So I would just ask you to encourage them to come forward to us. In regards to the low income, if there was any funding, I'm not aware of anything. Oh.
Yes, if people are, there are some initiatives for those on low income who want to upgrade their heating arrangements and their energy efficiency at home, and that's called Warm Homes, I believe. So if you can't find it on the council website, just drop me an email and I'll connect you with the relevant officers and we can put your residents in touch if you've got a particular person in mind or families in mind.
Duncan.
Thank you. We've heard a number of comments about enforcement, and I don't disagree with what they've said, but I would like to emphasise the importance of education and communication. With recycling, for example, it's taken years and years of communication and reinforcement of the messages to get to where we are now. So I'm all in favour of the lower limits and all these other initiatives, but it has to go with a consistent and solid communication programme so that people, I mentioned this particular wood-burning person, so that the sort of social environment shames people that do things that are contrary to good practice. Education.
I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that, Duncan. Those are very wise words. Are there any other questions? I have one, and it's a very simple question. Is it, when you have a wood-burning stove, the quality of the wood that you put on that stove, does that have a dramatic effect on the particulates, or does it not make a lot of difference? Significant. Okay. And so that goes back to Duncan's point about education, because is it reasonable to think that there are some people who are using a wood-burning stove that chuck any old rubbish on?
Absolutely, correct. There are even lists on the DEFRA website where within the smoke control zone, but even without actually, you know, you might have something called an exempt appliance, which means on the face of it, it burns wood cleanly. But some of them are only rated to burn softwood or to burn specific types of wood. So even if you have an exempt appliance, you still need to burn the correct fuel within it.
That's very helpful, thank you. Anna.
Just the last one, I know you want to finish the meeting, Chair. When you, it sounds like the strategy is probably going to be a good idea, but when you are kind of following in from Duncan's point about communication, I urge you to kind of contact with NHS partners, because there is a big link here, and if health is your main aim, that can filter through to primary care, to the conversations we're having on individuals and patients, you know, on a day-to-day basis, and then you can get the messaging out, like you said, because this is, we're not just an autocratic council trying to restrict people's movements and a culture war, etc. We are actually trying to help people, and there is a huge cost to human life, but also we haven't really mentioned the financial implication here. I think we should. If this is if Councillor Warren is right and this is direction of travel, then actually we're going to save a lot of cash if we start doing this now, because if legislation comes in 10 years that says you've got to do this, we're already having to play catch-up. So I just think talking to NHS partners, but also talking to the community and say this is coming anyway, I think is the way forward. And I completely agree with Duncan, by the way. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have Saskia's last question, if she has one, and then we'll come to somebody I'm sure will propose that the officers go away and produce a clean air strategy. I'm not a soothsayer, but I think there's a good chance that will happen. So, Saskia.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to add to the wood-burning stove conversation that even what the public speakers told us is that even when you have a compliant eco da-di-da-di-da, it is still very, very polluting. I'm happy to propose that we do set local targets and we put forward.
I like the timing, very good. And you're seconding. Okay, those in favour of... Thank you. Okay, and on that happy note, we can bring ourselves out of section item 11 onto item 12, and item 12 is the future work plan. Now, we talked about the future work plan already in the meeting. We have two colossus fighting each other for March. That is the nature recovery plan and the local plan. So my suggestion is that we put both of them forward for the March meeting, unless circumstances which are unknown at this point dictate that one should take precedent over the other. And if, Sarah, you would like more than half a meeting, then you could defer it to May, because I don't think we have anything in May at this stage.
So I'm not quite sure of the dependencies of the climate and nature one, but I mean, I know the officers have, one of the officers, Fiona Powell, was here listening earlier and went away to try and sort out the timings. But if March is the best timing, I mean, another approach could be to have, as somebody suggested earlier, a longer meeting, but perhaps to have a break and, you know, give people a walk around and, you know, a cup of coffee and something like that.
So happy to. I'm still awake, still functioning. So after 2 hours, amazing, isn't it? We could, we could have a break and a longer meeting, but we'll put all those together and we'll communicate with you nearer the time as to what is the definitive model for the March meeting. Saskia.
Could I ask how other councillors can get involved in the local plan? Because this panel will basically be one of the platforms where it can be discussed, and it has been other councillors who have been very much involved.
Absolutely, yeah, completely agree.
Can they?
Well, they can certainly attend, and it depends what. I'm slightly nervous about what, because I'm on the committee, the SPAG committee, and I'm not sure what's going to come in March. I suspect it may be policy rather than plan, but I don't know. But I would not want it to be an exclusive group of this group of councillors, because that doesn't make any sense at all, does it? I mean, it affects everybody. So maybe there should be another forum, or maybe we just allow. There is a steering group, yes. Yes, that's right. Yes, which I'm on, and you're on, I think. Yes, so there is that as well. But I'm concerned about your point, which is there are some councillors who aren't on that group and aren't in this group, so how do they gain access? So maybe we can invite them to come, certainly if it's a one-item agenda, because there'll be plenty of time, only if we've got a sensible plan to look at that stage in March. So there's quite a lot of variables there, and we'll work through it and come to, hopefully, the best solution for the March meeting nearer the time. Okay, Duncan?
Yeah, just to say that Councillor McCabe talked about policies, and I was a little bit concerned about that because we want to know about site allocations, and I wonder whether, you know, what we don't want is yet more obfuscation, if you like.
Eleanor.
What a wonderful word. I do like it, obfuscation. I think it would be a very good move, tactically, if we could invite maybe an officer or two, or make it known to the public, for Mendip West, because Councillor Hughes and myself and other people were quite involved in the Mendip local plan, which of course has had all kinds of hiccups, and have gone and given evidence about the impact on Midsummer Norton and the area of Somer Valley. If we were to ask them what to come, I think diplomatically at the very least, this would be a good move, but we really ought to coordinate the developments that are going on in the Chilcompton area with the Midsummer Norton ones.
I think that's probably another meeting. I don't think we can do that here, Eleanor, but I do agree with you, but I'm not sure that's for this policy. Well, there's no point in inviting them if they can't really take part. I think there's probably better ways. But again, I'm not ruling it out. I just need perhaps to think about it a bit better. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay, so I think I'm going to close the meeting. I'm very sorry that I'm late. I don't like being late. 13 minutes late, but thank you for your attendance. Thank you to substitutes. Very, very good. And we'll see you next time in March. And who knows what we'll